Okay, beautiful. Okay, so we'll get started then. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on cooperatives and housing. My name is Benjamin Grady. I'm an associate here at BAL Lawyers. First off, I'd like to give a quick thank you to BCCM for the opportunity to present today's seminar. The cooperative and mutual space is an exciting one, particularly from a real estate perspective. It offers a huge realm of possibilities to accommodate housing needs, whether that be to provide affordable housing, accommodation for assisted living, or to provide even just simply a variety in real estate in the marketplace for those who wish to come together to produce and create housing with a sense of, I guess, a community feeling. So the purpose of today's seminar is to provide some education, but also to raise awareness of the cooperative entity, but more particularly its potential uses within the housing industry in Australia. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to message them through to me. I am aiming to cover most of the material within the first 20 to 25 minutes, and to hopefully then open it up for some discussion at the end. But seeing as we only have 30 minutes, we might as well get straight into it. So the format of today's seminar is as follows, and I'll just get my slides up. So I'll first be providing an overview of the legal form, use and regulation of cooperatives within Australia, the Baugruppen housing model, and the current application and implementation of the model in Australia, as well as providing a brief analysis of the potential use of the Baugruppen housing model by cooperatives and the potential issues they may face with its implementation. So, what is a cooperative? Well, a cooperative is an organisation that is owned, controlled and used by its members primarily for the mutual economic, social or cultural benefits for its members. Like companies, cooperatives are separate legal entities from their members that can buy, own or sell property, can sue and be sued, borrow money, engage in business activities and are governed by a set of rules. They represent a more socially responsible form of enterprise and are formed on the basis of 7 principles. These include voluntary and open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for the community. The legislation regulating cooperatives is known as the national law, which has been adopted in most jurisdictions, including the ACT, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and the Northern Territory, as well as South Australia. On the 1st of January 2017, WA introduced amendments to their own Cooperative Act and regulations to bring it in line and consistent with the national law, but we're still yet to see whether or not Queensland will be amending their legislation. They're still considering whether it even requires amending. The national law itself actually states that its provisions are to be interpreted in accordance with those 7 principles, which we've just gone through. This means that the rules of the cooperative and the actions of its members and directors will be assessed against those principles. So there are 2 categories of cooperatives. The first is a distributing cooperative with share capital, and the second is non-distributing cooperatives. Distributing cooperatives allow for the distribution of dividends or rebates on share capital, and the cooperative can make a distribution of any surplus assets to its members if the cooperative is wound up. A non-distributing cooperative, on the other hand, may not distribute any profits or surplus assets to members. It can have a share capital or no share capital, but where it does have share capital, then any shares issued to members cannot carry a dividend. They can, however, be entitled to services or rebates from the cooperative as members. The second type of cooperative, the non-distributing cooperatives, are usually chosen when there is a need to raise capital, but the overwhelming purpose of the cooperative is to provide a service. I think it's important to note that even if a cooperative is first established as a distributing cooperative, it can actually convert to a non-distributing cooperative or vice versa later. In relation to the shares of the cooperative, if there are any, the rules of the cooperative may permit shares to be repurchased by the cooperative. For instance, where a member wishes to exit the cooperative, the member can request for the cooperative to purchase the member's shares. On the other hand, for inactive members, the cooperative is required to cancel those shares and repay the share price. Shares can only be transferred to other members of the cooperative or to those who the board of directors consider will be active members. So this helps to ensure membership in the cooperative is held by people genuinely interested in making the cooperative successful and who actually want to participate in the cooperative. Shares can also have different terms of issue. That is, different classes of shares can carry different rights. For instance, a share issued to fund a particular project may grant discounted goods or services to its members that funded the project. Now, cooperatives have a board of directors. There must be at least 3 directors and 1 secretary. And the directors and secretary are appointed by the members and are accountable to the members as well. The directors also have duties similar to those under the Corporations Act. These include that the directors or officers, in exercising their powers, must do so with a degree of care and diligence. That in exercising their powers, they must do so in good faith and in the best interests of the cooperative, and not to improperly use their position to gain an advantage for themselves or another. Though like a company, members, directors and employees ordinarily have no responsibility for the debts or liabilities of the cooperative, if there is a debt or a liability that is incurred or caused recklessly, negligently or fraudulently, that member or director may be personally liable for that debt or liability. So why establish a cooperative and not a company? Well, in my opinion, there's 2 standout factors. First is the element of democracy that you have within the cooperative. Unlike a company, cooperatives offer members more control and say within the cooperative and the ability to make decisions that basically represent or replicate the views of the majority. Members only have 1 vote, so regardless of the number of shares a member holds, all members within the cooperative have an equal say. The second key element that I think stands cooperatives against companies is a requirement for active membership. So again, unlike a company, active membership within a cooperative is mandated. It's mandated by the national law. The extent or nature of the active membership, though, is determined by the rules of the cooperative. So this basically means that members themselves commit to a set of rules or regulations that they themselves have prepared. And it basically allows for commitment and support of members to the cooperative to ensure that it's ongoing and hopefully successful. So that's just a quick overview of the cooperative entity. So moving on to the Baugruppen housing model. So it originated in Germany, and the word Baugruppe or building group describes the process of a group of people coming together to design, fund and construct their own accommodation or housing. The management of the development or of the construction of the housing is undertaken either by various associations, so these could include architects, developers or project managers, with the involvement of the members of the group. I like to sort of, I guess, categorise this approach as the assisted approach. The second approach is that the BAL group themselves undertake the development and control of the construction. So under the assisted approach, architects or developers or project managers, whoever the associations might be, they identify a plot of land to develop the accommodation. Often the land is publicly owned or it's publicly owned land that isn't used anymore or might be dilapidated and needs revitalisation in the area. And it's released to the associations for the purpose of cooperative housing, though private treaty sales of land can still occur within the BAL group model. So they'll prepare an initial design for the project, but it will remain relatively flexible to allow the BAL Group members to have input into the design and also the vision of the accommodation. For instance, the group has the flexibility to select the finishes and perhaps even the layouts within their individual units. So the building itself, the internal rooms or the internal dwellings might vary depending on what the owners decide to design their unit. Just on a side note, if you wanted to see an example of some of these BAL Group developments in place, all you need to do is Google BAL Group housing in Germany, and I'll come up with a few examples. And I think they quite clearly illustrate the benefits of going through the BAL Group on approach and the variety of design and facilities available, and I guess the differences in ideas and design as well that can be accommodated within the housing market. So the associations will first advertise the project, so they'll actually have the design in place, the land identified, and then they'll advertise for the BAL Group to complete the members. They'll then assist the group engaging with architects, builders and other contractors as necessary to ensure cost effectiveness and quality. Then they'll also guide the actual management and the construction of the redevelopment as well. And they'll control the costs and schedules and the quality of the materials. So they'll basically act as the project manager on behalf of the BAL Group. Where the management of the project lies with the BAL Group themselves, they'll obviously arrange for the entire purchase, design and construction of the project. So it's really up to the group collectively rather than an association or any one association assisting them. The accommodation need not be limited to any one type of housing. Again, if you do a Google search, you'll find that there is standalone housing, townhouses and unit complexes that have been developed under the BAL Group model. A site can be developed as townhousing, standalone housing or strata dwellings, or a mix of all three, and mixed use of residential and commercial is also possible. Arguably, the biggest benefit of the BAL Group model is the savings to cost and time, as the marketing costs and the developer's margin are cut, and the group has the flexibility to select cheaper and alternate materials and designs. The costing of the project is somewhat at the discretion of the BAL Group and becomes much more readily affordable or within their cost affordability. The BAL Group model is often thought to create and provide a variety of housing, both in design, cost and quality. It creates a sense of community appeal, and it provides an alternative to the developer investment and development model, which focuses on capturing uplift in sites, value and yields. I should note that there doesn't appear to be a preferred entity vehicle to purchasing these sites and then the ongoing management. So potentially a group could, create a trust to own the land and to continue management with the land after construction, or they could actually hold the land as tenants in common themselves. Although the latter approach obviously does have some complications when trying to sell property. So does the BAL Group model exist in Australia? Well, yes, there are 2 projects underway or will shortly be underway in Western Australia. You might have heard of these. These are the White Gum Valley project and 7 Quarry Street in Fremantle. So the White Gum Valley project is a collaboration between the Western Australia Land Authority, Land Corp, and the University of Western Australia. The project will use an assisted BAL Group approach. So under the project, Land Corp will sell the site and defer payments until the group have been able to obtain the contractors for the construction, the finance, and are basically in a position to start construction on the site. The Land Corp have also waived the payment of stamp duty on the initial purchase of the site as well. The site in this instance is to be purchased by a unit trust. The members of the group purchasing the dwelling, a dwelling within the development will hold a unit or a share in the unit trust, and this, I can only assume, will entitle members to occupy their respective dwellings on the site. The group under the White Gum Valley project will also be assisted through the planning and construction processes by a number of associations, including architects and a project manager. I believe an initial design for the site has already been prepared, and there's been some community engagement on the topic as well. So following the finalisation of the plans and the construction and planning approvals, the group will then enter into a joint agreement for the site. Though I'm not aware of the details, I would assume that this agreement would bind each member to proceed with the project and perhaps include an opt-out mechanism to substitute someone else in where a member wishes to leave. It would also include mechanisms for design and construction variations and approval costs associated with those variations. They would also expect the group to try and bed down as much as possible the design for the site to ensure that construction costs don't vary. Because at the end of the day, the funding for the site will come from the members themselves. So once the development approvals and finance has been obtained and the builders are selected, a settlement of the land will occur and the construction will commence. And I believe in this instance, once the buildings have been constructed, it'll actually be strata titled. Though I'm unsure how the ownership of the development will continue following the strata titling of the building. For instance, if after the strata titling there's to be a transfer to the members, there will obviously be stamp duty implications. But if the unit trust is to continue and to hold the units, then and basically lease the dwellings or the units to the members, whether by membership or by separate lease, it might resolve that issue. The City of Fremantle, as I mentioned, 7 Quarry Street, they're also proposing to use the Baugruppen model. Though there's not a great deal of material available, there have been expressions of interest. And then a third is the Nightingale Housing Group in Victoria, which you might be aware of. They've also announced they'll be using the Baugruppen model in the delivery of buildings in the Nightingale villages. But again, there's not a lot of information at this stage, but I believe they're engaging with the community and seeking feedback later this year. Oh, a bit quick there. So applying the Baugruppen model to cooperatives. Well, in my opinion, when you look at the principles of cooperatives set out under the national law and the Baugruppen model, there are clear synergies between the two, and I believe they have the potential to generate alternative approaches to providing affordable housing and suitable accommodation for a number of social groups. Though there are already organisations using models of a similar form to the Baugruppen model, and cooperatives such as Community Equity Housing Limited and Community Equity Housing New South Wales operating within that space, the development of housing by a cooperative using the Baugruppen model in its purest form, well, as far as I'm aware, is yet to take place. So I like to call this model the cooperative BAL group. Under the cooperative BAL group approach, the cooperative BAL group would be the entity to purchase the site to be developed. It would finance the purchase and construction of the development. It would engage architects for the design. It would engage the town planners if the architect's not undertaking the approval process. It would also be the entity to engage the project developer and to enter into the contract with the builder as well, and to manage construction of the development. It would also be the entity following construction to manage the common property of the land and enforce the rules of the cooperative. So it would effectively purchase the site, manage the construction, and then also manage the end product or the completed site, and regulate the use of those dwellings or units within the site and the common property by its members. The cooperative BAL group basically steps into the shoes of the developer and to manage the development at cost. As I noted previously, as there's no marketing costs or developer margins, and as the cooperative BAL group can control the design and materials of the development, I believe significant savings can be made to reduce the overall cost of the development and therefore the cost to members. A quick example would be if townhouses were to be constructed on a site, the BAL group, the cooperative BAL group might have the townhouses constructed out of cheaper materials and could even create a communal backyard to save what otherwise would be spent on landscaping costs for each townhouse. As to the form of ownership of the dwelling or to the development, this could be granted to the members by way of membership in the cooperative. That is, the class of shares entitles a member to occupation of a particular unit. So if a member holds, say for instance, A-class shares, they might be entitled to occupation of Unit 1 and B-class shares to Unit 2 and so forth. An alternative might be to lease the particular dwellings or the area of the dwellings to the members themselves from the cooperative. But I do know if they are long-term leases, there could potentially be stamp duty implications, so care should be taken. The steps to achieving and completing the accommodation through a cooperative BAL group approach are relatively simple and for the most part standard practice. It does, however, require significantly more awareness, education and planning, as each member of the cooperative has a say in decisions made by the cooperative through the various construction stages. So the potential issues for the cooperative BAL group. Well, I guess the first one would be the coming together of the group or of a group of like-minded people who wish to work together to meet their housing needs. So to establish that initial group is the first issue you have to overcome. Without the group, the cooperative BAL group obviously doesn't exist. I believe this is probably the most, if not the, I believe it's the most critical step in the process, as the needs of the group will basically guide the creation of the cooperative's rules, as well as the design of the site and the usability of the site and the accommodation as well. The needs of the group don't need to be identical, though there should be some common ground and agreement as to what end the accommodation is going to achieve. This could be a combination of a number of criteria, such as affordability, sustainable living, disabled access, provision or opportunity for assisted living, and availability of communal facilities as well. So a second issue that might arise is the establishment of the rules of the cooperative. Again, it's not really an issue, but it's going to take time to prepare and to have the foresight to draft the rules so that they overcome any future potential issues. So the rules of the cooperative will need to be such that it takes into account the purchase of the site, the development of the site, so that includes the engagement of architects, builders and project managers, approvals for construction costs, variations, schedules and the resolution of disputes, as well as the management of the site following construction. So again, that would include the use of the dwellings by members or the common property being used by members, the sale of shares and maintenance of the common areas. The rules should also be clear as to the entry and exit of members, the qualifications or active membership requirements for members, particularly in relation to the maintenance of the common areas or the common space, whether or not volunteering hours towards maintenance of the building, how extensive they are, and when the cooperative has the right to repurchase the shares and therefore take back control of the dwelling. For instance, if a member continuously breaches the rules of the cooperative. A third and final issue that I see lying in the cooperative BAL group space is as to finance. As the cooperative BAL group will have only been recently established, obtaining finance might be an issue. The recent projects such as the White Gum Valley project might suggest that these issues might be overcome. Obviously, in Australia, it's a new approach. Banks and other financial institutions aren't, I guess, as familiar with such an approach. But I see no reason as to why that can't be overcome with careful planning, having the agreements for both the purchase of the site, the management and development of the site, and the rules of the site moving forward. I believe it's more of a management task rather than anything else, but it will require significant work on the behalf of members to actually put those documents forward to any financial institution to, I guess, verify of the project moving forward. So to finance not only the purchase of the site, which will obviously include legal costs, stamp duty and registration fees, but also the construction, I believe it's likely necessary that the cooperative will need to issue shares to its members or to obtain a loan from its members to generate the capital for the financial institutions, which will secure a charge in their favour. I also expect the financial institutions will require members of the cooperative to also provide liability or personal guarantees, but those guarantees should be capped as well. An alternative to raising finance could be to issue cooperative capital units. They can be used to issue to members or non-members, giving those members or non-members an interest in the capital, but not the share capital of the cooperative, meaning that members retain control of the cooperative throughout the purchase, development and management phases, but also have the finance there. So whilst the idea of someone purchasing and developing land is obviously commonplace within the real estate space, the costs of actually understanding the exercise are significant and for many unaffordable. We're all aware of the low levels of housing stock, the increasing housing prices, and the high demand for rental premises. But I think as the market still takes this development investor approach to housing, people are going to continue to be forced into letting premises at higher rental rates, and ownership of the property or of the dwelling is going to become much more difficult. So the situation, as I said, is almost like the Rockdale pioneers who developed the concept of the cooperative. So if you're not familiar with that background, be sure to visit the BCCM website. It does give you some indication of the history. As the market will likely continue. Oh, sorry, give me 1 sec. Sorry about that. Looks like someone's trying to usher me out. So where was I? The Rockdale pioneers. So as the market will likely continue with the developer-investor approach, awareness and education, I believe, of affordable alternatives to development in the marketplace to provide those affordable alternatives, the cooperative BAL group will become a critical element of that approach. So I know we're out of time, but I might just quickly open it to any comments. I can see a few people have written in. Did anyone have any questions that they'd sort of like to have discussed or raised? Yes, Yolanda, these slides will be available. But if there are any questions that you happen to think of after the webinar, please direct them to Duncan Wallace at BCCM. If there are enough, we might even generate a Q&A information page and circulate it to anyone who's interested. It might also be a good way of distributing the answers to common questions. Kevin, I believe there are examples of existing houses or I guess neighbours forming cooperatives. None that I'm aware of in Australia, but there is some commentary, particularly in Germany, that it has occurred. There's no, I guess, prohibition to that sort of approach. But again, it's going to come down to the owners or the neighbours themselves coming as a group, identifying those values and the needs, and then obviously engaging the relevant associations for the redevelopment of their sites. It'll also come down to planning regulations and zoning. So if it happens to be in I guess, a residential or a suburb, for instance, in the ACT here, often blocks will only have a permitted use of one dwelling, and you'll need to vary the Crown lease, which can often be costly. So yes, it is possible, but there's obviously other cost factors such as demolition of any existing improvements and variation charges that might come into play. Louise, yes, I do see potential for agencies like CEHL. Look, obviously, this type of model has some element of risk for the individual members, simply out of inexperience in the construction process. And, you know, obviously that risk is very relevant, and for people who aren't sure of the process and what to look out for, can obviously incur quite a lot of debt and liability. So yes, there is, I think, particularly a space for agencies in that space to provide that guidance, perhaps even to be the cooperative or create new cooperatives that undertake the development with a particular group of members. And then once the development's constructed, to allow the members then to manage and control the site themselves, or to put in place an arrangement between that initial cooperative entity and those members for the ongoing management. So I believe there is a space for that. I think it's going to fall within the establishment of the cooperative itself and the engagement of the various associations in the construction and development phase, because I think that knowledge gap and the assistance that they can provide in that area would be significant. Okay, so we might wrap it up there. I'm conscious that you probably, well, if you're in the office, you might want to go home. So again, if you have any questions, please email them through to Duncan Wallace at BCCM. I'm sure we can put together a list of Q&As. There appears to be still questions coming in now. But thank you again for all attending, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks.